Queen Marika is a god with two aspects. There is Marika, a woman, golden-haired, the single true god of the Golden Order, who chose to shatter the Elden Ring. And then there is Radagon, a man, scarlet-haired, a mere common champion of the Golden Order who became Elden Lord, who chose to repair the Elden Ring. Two distinct identities occupying the same body. This is not as unusual as it might at first seem. Many real-world religions include gods with multiple aspects. The Greco-Roman pantheon, the Celtic pantheons, Hinduism, maybe even Christianity, depending on your opinion of the nature of the Holy Trinity. What is unusual about the portrayal of Marika and Radagon in Elden Ring is that Radagon is a secret aspect. The vast majority of characters in this world do not know that he is a part of Marika. There's also evidence that while Radagon shares her body, he does not share her divinity. Radagon is not a god, at least not yet. And what's even more unusual is that these are two aspects in conflict with each other. For a long time, it appears that they were two identities in harmony, working towards the same purpose, towards the eternal glory and dominion of the Golden Order. But at some point in their shared story, their purposes diverge. Their harmony is lost. And it is Radagon who makes a decision which will have dramatic consequences for everyone in the lands between. As I discussed in my video on Marika, it is his choice to seize total control that is the true catalyst for everything that follows. If he doesn't do that, then Marika does not destroy the Elden Ring. There is no shattering, no civil war between the demigods. Except maybe not. At the moment of the shattering, the lands between were already on the cusp of multiple dramatic and violent upheavals. Change was coming from all directions. Miquella had already abandoned the Golden Order and was probably planting the Halig tree. Malenia had already been infected by the Scarlet Rot and was spreading its transformative influence everywhere she went. Ranni was already making plans to rebel against the Greater Will. Rykard had already discovered the ancient serpent cult of Mount Gelmir. Mohg had already fallen under the sway of the Formless Mother. The Two Fingers were already looking for replacements for Queen Marika. With all this in mind, Radagon may not have been seizing control for his own selfish personal ambitions. Instead, he may have been attempting to establish order over a chaotic situation which was about to explode. And he did it in the only way he knew how. But we'll dig into that more at the end of the video. The goal of this video is to understand what the developers and writers of Elden Ring wanted their audience to think and feel about Radagon. Did they want us to perceive him as a villain, as someone who needed to be stopped? Or is he meant to be a more complicated character, someone who is trying to do what he thinks is the right thing? Unlike Marika, he has no dialogue whatsoever. His words are never recorded anywhere, which means both that he never has an opportunity to explain his motivations in his own words, and also that deciphering his character is more challenging. So what we're going to do together is examine every single item description in the game that mentions Radagon, and with each one we're going to discuss what the writers are revealing about his character. I think his story can be divided into 4 sections. First, his time as champion in Marika's army. Second, his time as husband to Queen Rennala. Third, his time as Elden Lord ruling alongside Queen Marika. And fourth, the shattering in the present day. So let's begin at the beginning, with his time as a champion in Queen Marika's armies. First, let's talk about that word, champion. It's used a lot in Elden Ring. Many different characters are described both in item descriptions and in dialogue as champions. Rennala is called a champion, so is Radahn, even our player character, the Tarnished. So it is not a specific title, but a common term in this setting used to describe someone who commits great deeds on the battlefield. This is in stark contrast to Marika, who is never described as a warrior. I don't think there is any mention anywhere of her actually fighting on the battlefield. It makes me wonder if Marika, despite all of her divine power, is in truth physically weak. Perhaps all of her physical strength is held within Ratigan. He is the part of her that is a fighter, the part that shoots first and asks questions later. But let's stop speculating and start looking at what the game actually tells us about him. I am going to begin with the description of the smithing stones, levels 7 and 8, which read, thought to have been used to hone the weapons of the champions of the war against the giants, at the birth of the Erd Tree. Okay, so this does not specifically mention Ratigan, but it does place us firmly within the timeline. The War of the Giants took place at the very birth of the Erd Tree. Queen Marika, or the Two Fingers, or whoever, planted the Erd Tree in the Altus Plateau to be a source of golden blessings and power, which would usher in a shining new age of life. As I discussed in my video on Marika, this was a time of optimism and idealism, when these characters truly believed they could use the Erd Tree to build a better world. But first, they needed to commit some good old-fashioned violence and conquest. They needed to kill all of the giants. So, the giants were an ancient race who served a fell god of ruinous fire. They maintained an undying, eternal furnace at the summit of their mountain. The description of the Roar Medallion states that their bellowing roars desolated nature, triggered avalanches, and whipped up storms of flame. For these reasons, the giant's very existence was a threat to the sapling Erd Tree, to the better world it promised. This was not a malicious war, but a defensive war. It was justified, probably the most justified war Marika ever waged. She was defending life, defending the Erd Tree. But it was still a genocide. Her armies completely wiped the giants off the map, leaving only a single survivor, and so, justified or not, the Golden Order was laid upon a foundation of bloodshed. And we know from the description of the Giant's red braid that Ratigan probably participated in this bloodshed firsthand. It reads, every giant is red of hair, and Ratigan was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. One of Ratigan's most defining features is his bright red scarlet hair. It gets mentioned over and over again, and that red hair is surprising. Queen Marika has golden hair, and seemingly so do most of the Golden Order nobility. For example, Kenneth Haight, a Baron of Limgrave, also has golden hair. Ratigan's red hair is something that sets him apart from the rest of the Golden Order society, and he hates it. He despises that color. As we are going to see, Ratigan is a character who pursues perfection, and he probably perceives that red hair as an imperfection. And thematically, it is also a permanent reminder of the fundamental imperfection and hypocrisy of the Golden Order, which declares itself a defender of life, but which was founded on slaughter. It is interesting that only Ratigan was cursed with the giant's red hair, as if only he and not Marika bears the sin of their genocide. Perhaps because he participated firsthand, or maybe because he is the warrior half of her, the violent half. And it is not the only war he participated in. Next, we are going to move to Liurnia, where we are going to read a couple battle monuments. The first is near the Grand Lift of Dectus, and it says, the First Liurnian War, Ratigan's glory burns red as his hair. Once again, we're seeing the way he is defined by his hair color, by his apparent imperfection. But let's pull back a little. The land of Liurnia was ruled by the Carian royal family, a family of sorcerers led by Queen Renala. According to the Dialogue of Muriel, which we are going to take a much closer look at here in a bit, this was a war of invasion. Ratigan led a great army down from the Altus Plateau and attacked the Carians. Unlike the war with the giants, I don't think this was a justifiable defensive war. There's no suggestion anywhere that the Carians were actively threatening the Golden Order. Instead, the Golden Order is on the warpath. America is conquering the entire lands between, seemingly for no reason other than to acquire more power. Her kingdom, which was founded on optimism and idealism, is becoming more cynical, and Ratigan is becoming a more visible symbol of it. This time, he's not just one of many champions, but the leader of the Golden Host. This monument specifically highlights his personal glory, suggesting that he must have won some great battle or victory, though that victory was not total. The Golden Order never managed a complete defeat of the Carians in battle. The description of the Carian Knight's sword states that the Carian Knights were equals to the Golden Order's champions in might, perhaps the most powerful opponents America's armies ever faced. There was a second Liurnian War, and this one ended very differently than the first. Another battle monument can be found near the Church of Vows, which says, "The Second Liurnian War, no victory for the Golden nor for the Moon, no prize but atonement and the birth of a vow." This vow is described in more detail by Muriel, a giant talking turtle wearing a bishop's hat who preaches the virtues of cooperation and compromise. To hear the beginning of the next chapter in Ratigan's story, we are going to listen to a little of this turtle's dialogue together. As you listen, ask yourself, what about Ratigan's character is being revealed here? How is this description of him different than how he has been described previously? Okay, here it is.
Lord Ratigan was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host. When he met Lady Renala in battle, he soon repented his territorial aggressions there, and became husband to the Carian queen. Ratigan once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Renala. The order of the Erdtree and the fate of the moon were conjoined, and all the wounds of war forgiven. This miracle blesses the Church to this day, and so you need only follow Ratigan's example to restore any bond, however strained or severed, to its rightful state of harmony.
Previously, every description of Ratigan described him as a warrior and a champion, but now the writers are revealing a different side of him. This is a Ratigan who laid down his weapons and chose love and diplomacy instead, who forged a lasting peace with a former enemy, who brought a new faction into the Golden Order, permanently strengthened. This parallels the story of Godwyn the Golden, who made peace with the dragons and established a dragon cult in the capital, making the dragon's strength a part of the Golden Order. The only difference between them is that eventually Ratigan is going to break his vow, whereas Godwyn remained true for the rest of his life. In my video on America, I described Ratigan as rigid and unchanging, but I think I made a slight mistake. Ratigan does not become rigid until later in his story. Earlier on, he is much more flexible. In the story of the Second Liurnian War and the miracle at the Church of Vows, we have an example of a very distinct change in his character, from warrior to peacemaker, from bloody invader to loving husband. It is a common fan theory that this was all an elaborate scheme to weaken an enemy America was unable to defeat on the battlefield, that he never really cared about Renala and was always planning to break her heart and leave her behind. And while I do think this theory is plausible, and as we'll see in the next item description, Ratigan definitely had some cynical reasons for marrying her, but I think there is also a lot of evidence that he really did care for her, which we will discuss more later. This marriage vow begins the second phase of Ratigan's life, as husband to Queen Renala. So, what do the writers tell us about this marriage? Well, let's look at some item descriptions to find out, starting with the description of the Ratigan icon talisman, the Greeks. As the husband of Renala of Caria, the red-haired Ratigan studied sorcery, and as the husband of Queen America, he studied incantations. Thus did the hero aspire to be complete. This is that pursuit of perfection that I mentioned before. Ratigan wants to be complete, to be perfect, to master both sorcery and miracle. And again, this is where his red hair comes into play, as a symbol of his fundamental flawed nature. from his cursed hair, the writers are telling us that his pursuit of perfection will always fall short. What is also being revealed in this item description is that Ratigan is a curious character. He is a knowledge seeker. This is another mistake I made in my video on Marika. In that video, while discussing Marika's choice to cast aside blind faith and delve into the secrets of the Golden Order, I theorized that Ratigan may have opposed this move because he wants to remain blindly faithful. But this item description suggests otherwise. He, just as much as her, desires more knowledge. However, there is a difference. While it seems that Marika is searching for truth's sake, Ratigan is searching for more knowledge for his own sake, to make himself better. And finally, this item description also reveals the possibly cynical true reason why Ratigan married Rennala in the first place. In the Carian Queen, he faced a power he had never encountered before: sorcery and the magic of the full moon. This was a power that matched even the Erdtree's blessings in strength. I think he wanted to understand it, to delve into its inner workings, to make its strength his own. And the best way to do that was to ally himself with its greatest practitioner, the Carian Queen herself. By her side, earning her trust, he could learn everything he ever wanted to know about sorcery. However, when we finally do face him in battle, he does not employ a single sorcery. He only wields the Erdtree's power, and we'll discuss why that is later. For now, let's move on to the next item description to learn more about his marriage to Rennala. There are the golden tailoring tools, which Ratigan brought with him to Liurnia, and suggests that he may have been tailoring his own clothing, which is interesting. Is that because he is an industrious character, someone who likes to take care of his own problems firsthand? Or is it simply because he wanted to keep the secret of his true identity far away from Rhea Lucaria's failings? And secrecy is a key trait of Ratigan's character, as revealed by the description of the Mask of Confidence, which reads, "Mask with the mouth sewn shut with gold thread." When Ratigan married Rennala, he ordered the Carian magic preceptors to don these masks, to make it clear that all of their matters were to be kept strictly private. In a setting full of secrecy-loving characters, Ratigan takes it to an extreme. This is a character who never openly reveals what he wants or why he wants it. Never openly discusses any of his plans with anyone. That's why in this video we have to pore through all of these item descriptions for little scraps of information about him. And in this way, once again, he is very similar to Marika. They are both schemers, long-term planners, manipulators. You can never be quite sure how many pies they dip their fingers in, or what their true goals and beliefs really are. Next, let's discuss Ratigan and Rennala's children. Together they have 3, all of whom will go on to become extremely important and influential figures in the lands between. All 3 of them will attempt to change the course of history. They are Lunar Princess Rani and Empyrean, Praetor Rykard, the leader of the Volcano Manor and future Lord of Blasphemy, and finally Star-Scored Radahn, General of the Red Knights. What can we learn about Ratigan's character from his children? Well, each of them is powerful, ambitious, and respected. They are able to inspire extreme loyalty in their followers. They are talented sorcerers and spellmakers. They forge their own path through life, disregarding notions of tradition or morality. They are all willing to kill, destroy, and conquer to do what they think needs to be done, what they believe is right. His children by Marika share many of these traits as well. For so many of his offspring to share these qualities, it must be a reflection of their father. And so, from his children, we know that Ratigan is ambitious, that he will choose to do what he thinks is right, regardless of the consequences, no matter who he has to hurt to do it, which I think helps explain his choice to wrestle control away from Queen Marika. I also think that Ratigan is portrayed to be a genuinely good father. The descriptions of both the Gelmir Knight Helm and the Redmane Knight Helm include a version of this line. The red plume or red crest is a symbol of Rykard or Radahn's pedigree as a son of Ratigan. And the description of Radahn's red mane helm reads, Radahn inherited the furious, flaming red hair of his father Radagon, and is fond of its heroic implications. I was born a champion's cub. Now I am the lord of the battlefield's lion. For Radagon, his red hair is a source of embarrassment, a glaring imperfection for all the world to see. But for his sons, it is a mark of pride. Look at us. We are the sons of Radagon, and we want the whole world to know it. Skipping ahead to later in his life, from the descriptions of the Discus of Light and Radagon's Rings of Light incantations, we know that Radagon and his son Mikla crafted spells as gifts for each other. Putting all of this together, the writers are painting a picture of a character who had a very positive relationship with all of his children, at least for a while. It is of course significant that nearly every single one of them will rebel against the Golden Order he fights so hard to protect. Ranni, Rykard, Mikla, and Malenia all explicitly attempt to overthrow it. Whatever it is that Radagon sees in the Golden Order, whatever it is that he perceives as worth protecting, he was not able to pass on to his children. Instead, to his own future ire, he passed on his incredible ambition instead. And there is one final thing we have to talk about concerning Radagon's children with Rennala. Each of them is apparently healthy, strong, and normal. This is in stark contrast to Marika's children, every single one of whom, with the notable exception of Godwin Golden, are born cursed. As I have discussed in multiple videos now, in fiction, cursed children often symbolize the sins and wrongdoings of the parent. The worse the parent is, the more deformed and hideous their offspring. It's hard to know exactly what to make of this. Whatever sins Marika committed in her rise to power, you would think that Radagon, as her other half, would be just as much to blame. But he's not. The only curse he bears is his red hair. This suggests that she has committed some other deed so foul and so terrible that it has permanently stuck to her, but which he is blameless of. The only possible candidate for this deed is the vague original sin she committed at the Gate of Divinity when she first ascended to godhood. The seduction and betrayal described in the Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer. Whatever led to her tearing these golden threads out of this disgusting mass of bloody flesh. Marika's godhood itself has been forever cursed by whatever she did there, and that is the difference between them, because Radagon is not a god, at least not yet. Marika says this definitively in her dialogue. She is the godly half. She is the sole, lone god of the Golden Order, not him. He is just a champion and hero. And because it is her godhood itself that is cursed, he is free of it, at least for now. I suspect that if he ever did succeed in usurping her godhood, he would have inherited that curse too. Now, it is time to move on to the next phase in Radagon's life, his time as Elden Lord, ruling at Queen Marika's side. To begin with, he abandons his wife. Let's listen to everybody's favorite turtle explain what happened. Here it is.
However, when Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Rennala aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord. Sadly, her heart was broken when Lord Radagon left her, and then, when the Academy rebelled against the royals, she was locked away in the Grand Library. In the end, Lady Rennala was left alone, cradling the amber egg Lord Radagon bequeathed her. Now she devotes herself to it through forbidden rite, the grim art of reincarnation. It would be well to remember, severing a vow strongest of bonds has consequences ever more dire.
Once again, the writers are revealing a new aspect of Radagon's character. First, we saw the champion and warrior, then we saw the peacemaker and loving husband, and now we see the Oathbreaker. For the first time, the writers are revealing something villainous within him, a deeper flaw, a capacity to cause harm to those he supposedly cares about. And, as Muriel says, this broken vow has dire consequences. Renala seems to have truly loved her husband, and he breaks her heart when he leaves. Eventually, probably during the shattering, after she is weakened by heartache, the greedy sorcerers of the Academy of Raya Lucaria revolt. All of the Carian loyalists at the Academy are slaughtered, the town of King's Realm is destroyed, the soldiers of Raya Lucaria besiege Carian Manor, but are then massacred by defensive spells in turn. In this way, Radagon's broken vow creates a domino effect of destruction and suffering, and no one is harder hit than his once beloved wife. She is sealed inside the Raya Lucaria library. In permanent isolation, abandoned by everyone, she begins to lose her mind. She becomes trapped in an endless cycle of reincarnation, rebirthing the same loyal mages over and over again. The only family she has left by the time the shattering stole away the rest of her children. And worst of all, it seems as if Radagon knew what was going to happen to her, or at least suspected it. Why else would he leave his red wolf behind to protect her if he did not suspect some threat? But in the act of leaving the wolf behind, the writers are revealing something else about his character, that he truly did care about her. And that's not all. He also gifted her a great rune, specifically the Great Rune of the Unborn. This is actually kind of crazy. It is their great runes that give the demigods of the present their tremendous power. Each great rune is a fragment of the Elden Ring, a living relic with the potential to reshape reality itself. This was no paltry going away present. This was a source of power practically unheard of. Before the shattering, the only rune bearers in the world were Malekith, who held the Rune of Death, and Queen Marika herself. Radagon essentially gave Renala the power of a god, so he must have cared for her, which makes it all the more surprising that he abandoned her. But we'll talk about that more in a bit. There is a possible explanation. In the third phase of his life, Radagon became Elden Lord, the most powerful person in the lands between besides Queen Marika herself. So, what did he do with all this power? Well, first of all, he raised all of his children by his first wife into demigod status, granting them positions of power and influence. I assume that Rykard would not be a praetor or in command of Mount Gelmir, or that Radahn would not have been able to found his army of Redmanes without their father's support. He may have abandoned his wife, but he did not abandon his children. He seems to have had at least 4 more demigod children with Marika, the cursed twins Miquella and Melania, and judging by his red hair, probably Mesmer too. I'm gonna throw Melina in as well because I don't know who else her father could have been, and I think we can assume he continued to be a loving and supportive parent. To see more of what he did in his new position, we have to read some more item descriptions, starting with the Golden Order Greatsword, which reads, Greatsword made of light, modeled after the Elden Ring itself, forged by King Consort Radagon to proudly symbolize the tenets of the Golden Order. Telltale signs betray that this was once the Greatsword, bequeathed to him by his first wife Renala. The writers are revealing yet another development in Radagon's character here. As I discussed earlier, one of the reasons he married Renala was to master her sorcery, but now he is not only abandoning her, but erasing that entire part of his life. Instead of being the master of both sorcery and incantations, he is choosing to devote himself totally to the power of the Erd Tree, to the Golden Order, and nothing else. And that is why he erases any trace of Renala's influence from his greatsword. It is impossible to know what led to this change. Earlier in his life, Radagon was a more flexible character, willing to welcome new ideas into the Golden Order. However, going forward, he is going to become far more rigid. Eventually, he is going to decide that his own personal vision, is the only one that can be allowed to dominate the lands between. He will cast aside the two fingers, Marika, his own children, everything. But we'll get to that later. Next, let's look at the descriptions of the ritual sword talisman, which reads, a talisman patterned after swords used in ritual combat held to honor the Erd Tree. The practice had died out by the age of King Consort Radagon, but the remains of the arenas where ritual combat took place can still be found in every land. Throughout the lands between, you can find these massive coliseums. Apparently, in the time of Godfrey, ritual combat used to be a common element in Erd Tree worship, but not anymore, not with Radagon in charge. First of all, even though they were both champions of the battlefield, Radagon was a softer and more sophisticated ruler than his predecessor. Godfrey was always one step away from being a brutal, battle-loving barbarian, whereas Radagon is a learner, a spellcrafter, someone who is constantly seeking to better himself. Secondly, Radagon was making changes to the Golden Order. He ended the practice of ritual combat. He closed down the Colosseums. He wasn't just trying to make himself perfect, he was trying to make the Golden Order perfect too. Again, this is not blind faith. This is not a character who is shackled by tradition and conservatism. This is a character who has his own personal vision of how the world should be, and is willing to do what has to be done to make that vision come true. So what other changes might he be responsible for? Well, Radagon seems to be closely connected to the rise of something called Golden Order fundamentalism. We know that he was a practitioner of fundamentalism because he crafted the Rings of Light incantation, which is explicitly stated to be a fundamentalist spell. Golden Order fundamentalism is the academic study of the Golden Order. This is in direct contrast to the blind worship that most citizens of the lands between engage in. It is an attempt to rationally or scientifically break the Golden Order down to its most fundamental parts. And we know what those fundamental parts were. The description of the law of regression incantation reads, the fundamentalists describe the Golden Order through the powers of regression and causality. Regression is the pole of meaning that all things yearn eternally to converge. Okay, so these are the two fundamental elements of the Golden Order, regression and causality. Causality is easy to understand. It is the law of cause and effect, of action and reaction. When you take action A, it causes action B to occur, which in turn leads to reaction C, and then D, and on into infinity. Regression is far more obscure. What does it mean for all things to yearn to converge? This reminds me of the Dreg Heap from Dark Souls 3, where at the end of that game's timeline, the entire world of Dark Souls has been converged together into a single chaotic jumble. And it also reminds me of the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending, in which the flame melts the whole world down, burns everything which distinguishes and divides, until the lands between reach a primordial, uniform, featureless state where life can no longer exist. According to the Three Fingers, once upon a time, everything in the Elden Ring universe was once contained within a single cosmic something, the One Great, which was later fractured, creating the conditions in which life as we know it could arise. And according to the law of regression, it seems as if everything in this universe yearns to return to the One Great, to return to uniformity and oneness. The Golden Order is the exact opposite of the law of regression. The Golden Order divides society into a distinct hierarchy governed by rules and laws. The Golden Order keeps things separate from each other. It prevents the law of regression from following its natural course. Perhaps one of the duties or goals of Golden Order fundamentalism is to resist this convergence, to keep the world divided so that life may continue to thrive. Maybe this revelation is why Radagon has chosen to cast aside his study of sorcery and devote himself totally to the Golden Order. Maybe he believes he is defending the state of the universe itself. Maybe he believes he is the only one who can. but we're veering pretty heavily into speculation here. That law of regression also suggests a possible explanation for why Ratigan abandoned Renala to rejoin Marika. In the same way that the world is naturally fated to reconverge at some fundamental level, so are Ratigan and Marika. They were able to exist separately for a time, but not forever. They are attracted to each other like polar opposite magnets. If this is true, then perhaps Ratigan did not choose to take control of their shared body at all. Maybe it is just the result of a natural process. But let's move on. Next, let's look at the Star and Sword Seal talismans. There are 4 of these, 2 each for Marika and Ratigan, which are nearly identical. They are all in the shape of eyes, similar to the seal Marika placed on Mesmer. Marika's is golden, while Ratigan's is red. Hers displays a rune shaped similarly to an arc, and his displays the lattice rune structure seen on both his statues and the Erdtree seal. Hers improves magical abilities, while his improves physical abilities, lending further evidence to my earlier theory that he is the physically stronger half, the warrior half. This might also explain why he studies sorceries and incantations. In order to become more perfect or complete, he wants to make her advantages his own. Anyway, now let's actually read these item descriptions and see what it reveals about his character. These seals represent the lifelong duty of those chosen by the gods. And then, solemn duty weighs upon the one beholden, not unlike a gnawing curse from which there is no deliverance. Both of these talismans increase her character's power while also increasing the damage taken, which symbolizes the way Marika's own power was cursed. The suggestion here is that godhood comes with some sort of duty, and that something is unpleasant, like a gnawing curse. Maybe holding the Elden Ring inside your very flesh, this living relic of incredible power with the ability to reshape reality, maybe it sucks. Maybe it hurts. Maybe Marika is in actual pain all the time. Or maybe it's something more abstract, more psychological. The general stress and responsibility of leadership, of constantly having to make high-pressure decisions, which will always hurt someone, of never being good enough, where the stakes are so high that any mistake can have terrible consequences for tens of thousands of lives. Especially in this tyrannical Golden Order, where Marika has to do things like imprison her own children in the sewers because they were born the wrong race, or banish another child to the Shadowlands because he happened to be born cursed. Those decisions must have affected her emotionally. Maybe wielding power itself is a curse. After all, Saint Trina would rather kill Mikola, her beloved other half, rather than allow him to become a god, which she describes as a prison. As I theorized in my video on Marika, I think she wanted to give up, that she wanted to die. But I don't think that Ratigan agreed. I think he wanted to remain loyal to the Golden Order, to this cursed duty, even if it caused him personal misery, which it probably did. As we have seen, Ratigan seems to have genuinely cared about his children. It must have been miserable for him to see the painful, debilitating curses that Mikola, Melania, and Mesmer were all born with. But even with all the obvious suffering it caused, he still believed in the Golden Order, or at least some version of it, that it was the best possible path forward. By the end of his time as Elden Lord, the walls were already crumbling down around him. His beloved Golden Order was already fracturing. Let's take another look at the Ratigan's Rings of Light incantation description, which reads, "A gift of gratitude to the young Mikola from his father Ratigan." And yet, the young Mikola abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Melania's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. Mikola's abandonment of the Golden Order seems to have predated the Shattering, to have coincided with the creation of this spell, which means that Ratigan's own son had turned his back on him, was already trying to replace the Golden Order with unalloyed gold, and Melania had probably already gone with him, and she was spreading the transformative influence of another Outer God wherever she went. spreading new life and a new order even if she didn't want to. Ronnie and Rykard were already plotting to overthrow the Greater Will. Moog had already discovered the Formless Mother. Meanwhile, the Two Fingers were already selecting potential replacements for Queen Marika. The Imperium, new gods to rule over a new age, which means that Radagon was going to be replaced too. He was going to lose everything. And in the distance, over the horizon, lay the constant threat of the Tarn, a banished heathen army that Marika had sworn to call home someday, to wage war in the lands between, to create chaos, to seize the Elden Ring. And worst of all was Marika, his other half. Once upon a time, together they had forged the Golden Order, but now she was plotting and scheming behind his back, threatening to destroy everything he had fought for, the very thing he had abandoned his own beloved wife for, throwing it all away. It must have felt as if everyone was betraying him, his own family, his wife, his children, even the emissary of his god. I think this is when Radagon made a dramatic decision which would forever change the fate of the lands between. He chose to take control, to become a god, to become the god. And why shouldn't he? It was Radagon who was always trying to better himself, who strove to become more and more complete. It was Radagon who was called a hero, a champion of the battlefield. His children were the healthy and strong ones. He was not cursed the way Marika was. He had the strength, the will, the vision to be better than her, or at least that's what he believed. I do not think that his decision was motivated by a villainous or selfish desire for more power, but instead I think he really believed he was doing the right thing. With the power of a god in his hands, with Marika out of the way, he could become the ruler that the lands between needed. But it was never to be. Seeing what was about to happen, Marika destroyed the Elden Ring. And in doing so, not only destroyed the world they had built, but destroyed them both, shattered their shared body. Radagon would never be a god, would never be complete. Which brings us to the fourth and final phase of his story, the present day. What is Radagon doing now, and why? After the destruction of the Elden Ring and the disappearance of both Marika and Radagon inside the Erd Tree, a power vacuum was created. The lands between were thrown into a civil war, the Shattering. Nearly every single demigod went into open revolt. The kingdom was torn apart by betrayal and bloodshed. With the terrible damage his own body had received, Radagon was no longer strong enough to do anything about it. He could no longer force his will upon others, but he still did not give up. He influenced events in the only way left to him. He sealed the Erd Tree. We know it was him because the seal is in the same latest structure that we see on his statues and on his scar seal. He would never allow any of those traitorous or cursed demigods, none of his unfaithful, undeserving children or stepchildren, inside to seize what was left of the Elden Ring's power. And none of those lowly heathen tarnished either. By sealing the Erd Tree, he prevented any more damage from being done, prevented any more disastrous changes from being made. And it's worth noting that Radagon has gone totally rogue here. He is no longer serving the Greater Will. He is no longer following the guidance of the Two Fingers. He is serving himself and his own personal vision of what the Golden Order should be. In my video on Marika, I discussed how the key theme of Elden Ring's story is power. It's about who wields power and what they do with it. Well, Radagon uses the last of his power to hold the lands between in a permanent stasis, a permanent stalemate, where no one can ever achieve their goals, not even himself. This is what makes him a villain, this refusal to relinquish control even after he has lost, this refusal to allow the torch to be passed on, to allow anyone else to inherit his position, no matter who they are or what they want. If Ratigan got his way, the lands between would remain broken forever, never being given a chance to heal or transform. In this way, he is similar to Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight and Cinder from Dark Souls. Gwyn was another character who refused to allow the world to move on, to let nature run its course. He wanted to keep the world stuck in the stasis of his Age of Fire forever, and so in the end he was destroyed. Sometimes a villain is not defined by what they do, but by what they won't do, because refusing to make any choice at all can be just as disastrous as making the wrong choice. Ratigan could have opened the Erdtree to a worthy successor. Why not let Morgoth inside, who by all accounts was just as loyal to the Golden Order as Ratigan himself? But Ratigan is stubborn, maybe even a bit egomaniacal. He fights to the bitter last breath, and so it is inevitable that he would be destroyed, because change, just like death, is always inevitable. That is where my examination of Ratigan's character ends. But I still have a lot more I want to say about Marika. I realized as I was editing that last video that there are a ton of topics relating to Marika that I barely touched on there. So next time I'm going to post a final cleanup video where I will discuss everything about Marika's character that I didn't get a chance to last time. What really happened at the Gate of Divinity, her relationship with the Hornsent, the shamans, the Two Fingers with Godfrey, every mystery in her story that remains unsolved.
This video will explain the story of Black Myth Wukong.